All right, guys, this is a more complicated one. So I wanted to go over this regardless, but this is definitely more of an advanced fix. I wouldn't anticipate anybody intuitively knowing how to solve this issue right away. But nonetheless, let's go through it. The issue is that there are missing faces along this stair and how to repair those. So I took a look at this model and I've figured out the fastest and correct way to get this issue solved. But I also noticed that, like in our last video, we've got an ungrouped element on the floor, and that's going to get us in trouble. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fix that, because that's going to be something that's going to bite us if we don't get to it sooner than later. So if I triple click on this, I see that I've got some wall elements, and I've also got some floor elements. So the first thing I'm going to do, I don't want to delete or lose all of this wall element info. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to group it really fast. I'm going to lock it, and I'm going to select all, go to edit, select all, and then edit, hide, just so I can see what it is I'm working with. Actually, this is not the end of the world to repair some of this stuff and add back some of these bits of information. So what I actually will do is I'm going to unlock it, open this up, delete this. I kind of wanted to impress on everybody that it's not a big deal to have to rebuild certain bits of geometry, especially when you're learning SketchUp for the first time. The more you build, the faster you'll be at it. So to have to rebuild a wall is not gonna take that long. So I see that I've got some lines and some shapes happening on this. So what I want to do is I want to just switch this over to shaded. I'm going to select. There was also a question about how to get, if you're on a Mac, how to get some of these windows, and I'll talk about that in this video as well. So, but before I do, I'm going to select these elements that I don't want, and I'm just going to delete them. And when you select an opening, as long as it's not connected to the edge in any way, you can go ahead and delete it, and it's not going to be a problem. I don't want holes or lines drawn on this slab because this should just be a nice, clean, basic shape. So I can go back to my shaded again, and I'm going to go ahead and push-pull. Well, if I push-pull this down at this point, I'm going to lose that material. So instead of push-pulling it down or up, because notice when you push-pull that away, you actually lose the material. This is an inherent quality within SketchUp that I'm not a huge fan of, is that once you've painted a material onto something and then you push-pull it away, that material starts to disappear. So instead of push-pulling it down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some my line tool, and I'm just going to go down. Let's just go down 3 feet. And I'll just kind of basically make this into a box. Okay, so I'm just going all the way around. I'm holding shift down and I'm referencing these edges. This has nothing to do with that stair issue, but this is just making sure that we've got a nice clean model to start with. Okay, another thing that you can do. This is just a quick tip. You'll notice that sometimes you'll get the purple underside of a shape, and then sometimes you'll get the outside of a shape. If you don't like to see the underside of these faces, you can right-click on them and go to Reverse Faces, and it's going to actually reverse and give you the front side. The other thing you can do is you can click on one of these faces, and if it's the face that you like to see, if it's the outside face, you can right-click and you can say Orient Faces, and it's going to bring them all to the front. But what this is telling me is that material was painted on the backside face. So let's go ahead and Apple Z undo that. Instead, I can just right-click and say Reverse Faces along these 4 outside edges, just for the purpose of having a nice clean model. So go ahead and reverse face there. Okay. So now what I have is I have a slab. I have a nice basic box. If I open it up, I'm able to select all the pieces and everything's working the way I want it to. Okay. Now I can edit, unhide all. And let's take a look at this stair. This I can go ahead and hide. I don't need this here, because that's just the shape that we're using to kind of create this other shape. So let's just look at just the stair by itself. The easiest way to do that, again, we're going to lock it. We're going to edit, select all, edit, hide, and then right-click, unlock. I want to be able to repair these faces that are missing. SketchUp doesn't actually ever create anything in a true curve. And the way I know that is if I look really close, I can see that these are straight lines down at the bottom. See, these are individual lines that I can click on and select. When you go ahead and select your curve tool or your arc tool, you'll see at the bottom that there's a sides, and that's telling you that this arc is going to be 12 sides, no matter how far you go. And notice as I get more extreme, the sides become more obvious. It becomes clearer that they're all segmented sides. Same thing goes with a circle. When I start with a circle, I've got 24 sides. I can type in 12 on that as well, enter, and then start my circle, and you'll see that it's a circle, but not really. There's no such thing as a true circle. If I wanted to make this really nice and clean, this circle, I could type in, 64 sides, enter, and it's going to be really, really smooth. It's going to be really hard to tell that there's 64 segments, but ultimately, when I make that into a group, open it up and pull it up, and then select it, you can see these dotted lines indicate each one of these faces is a flat face. Now the reason I'm explaining this is because I want it to be known that this is repairable because ultimately these are all flat faces. So intuitively what I should be able to do here, I should be able to just draw a line straight down this face and connect it, and it'll make this work. But for some reason that's not happening. So I have to decide what's going on here. So again, my next step, I'm just going to try from this point to bring a line straight down and connect it there. And look, I'm able to actually connect this point straight down, and I can see that I'm starting to fill this in a little bit. So it's starting to work. So this line here, right up here, is exactly in line along the blue axis with this line here. Let's try it from this point. Let's see what happens. If I draw a line straight down and connect it at the bottom, again, I'm able to connect those. Now theoretically, I should be able to delete this line. Delete. Okay, great. That means that this is a flat face and that this line, this line, this line, and this line are all in line with one another from top to bottom, straight up and down. You can see there's a little break here, right here, like this, because these two planes, this plane, this one right here, and this one are not on the same plane. There's starting to be a little bend there, so that's why we lose that. That's why we can't delete this line. We can hide it, but we can't delete it. Okay, so now what happens if I take my line tool and go straight down from here? Boom. Nothing. I get a line, but I don't get a face that fills in. And I start to think, well, what's happening there? Why is that the case? Let me get a little closer in and show you. So you got to get real close for this to make any sense. So notice when I draw that line straight down, it lands on the face of this, not on the edge. So what that's telling me is that something is happening here where this line and this line and this line are not lining up with this. How can I be sure of that? Well, let me look at this from the top view. So if I have my views palette up, I'm going to select top here. So now I'm looking at this purely from the top, and I'm going to do a view and hold on, I'm sorry, it's camera. I'm used to shortcuts, so it takes me a minute sometimes when I go look up these. So I want to see this without perspective at all. So if I go to camera and uncheck perspective, I'm now looking at this shape without any perspective at all. And if I zoom in really close to this area where I'm having trouble, do you notice that there's a difference here in this shape and the shape above? So what's happening is that the shape below is not connecting to the shape above. So I'm having an issue connecting these planes. It's a little crazy, and again, this is a little bit more advanced. I wouldn't expect anyone in a beginning course to be able to fix or recognize something like this, but I think the theory behind why this happens is important to know. Let me go ahead and go back to my camera and turn perspective back on. So how am I going to fix this? Well, the best way to do that is probably to take a guide and use a guide as reference. So if I reference this line here straight up along this plane, and I'm holding my tape along this plane so I know that I'm using this plane as reference, I can also see that as I'm pulling it up, see that blue arrow that's going up along with it? If I click to that point, I can see now that this stair is somehow slightly out of place with this guide. So I'm going to do kind of what we did in the first troubleshooting video. I'm going to double click on this line so that these can connect. And I'm going to do the same thing along the floor. I'm going to hold shift down to make sure that it stays along this blue. And I'm going to reference this point like this. Click. And do the same thing here. Double click there. So what I have to do is I have to redraw this little bit of triangle here. And I mean, from far away, you would never know. Never. You have to get really, really close to see this. I'm going to connect starting from this point with my line tool, and I'm going to go to that intersection there between my two guides and drop back to that point there. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this top stair. Click from this point to this point, whoop, and to that point. All that's left to connect for me is from this top point here straight down to that point there. And notice, once I make that final connection, not only does it fill in this face, this little sliver of a face right here, but it also fills in that face right there. And now what I can do is I can delete the lines that I don't need, the old lines that were out of place. So I select those and delete, select, delete, select this little piece and delete, whoop, and then select that piece over here and delete. Okay. So now I've been able to repair this. This is all one face, and the reason it wasn't connecting and the reason it wasn't working was because this step right here and this little piece of step right here were slightly off somehow. And there's no way for me really to know exactly how those two pieces came off because I didn't see this thing get built, but you can always troubleshoot, and if you know the rules, you can always kind of figure out why and what's happening. Okay, the last thing I can do is I can go ahead and edit, delete my guides, select this face here and hide it, select this face here and hide it, and then close. Now, this is a quick little trick. I think we've talked about this in this class also, or we will talk about it, but that is if I have a line that I want to hide within a group, I have to make a quick dummy box somewhere outside. Go ahead and just make a box, select it, group it, hide it, unhide it, and then delete it. And the reason I do that is because I want to break the chain within the program from when I first hid those lines inside that group. Because now SketchUp will forget that I hid those lines, so I'm able to edit, unhide all without those lines coming back. Let me go ahead and hide that. So those lines stay hidden. They're inside there still. They're still hidden right within this. But because I have this in a group, the group kind of protects that hidden geometry from coming back unless I want it. If I ever want those lines to come back, I can just double click on this and I can edit, unhide all within the group and those lines will come back. Okay? That's just a little trick. That's something to keep in mind for down the road if you ever want to hide a line without it coming back. We'll talk more about that in another video. But anyway, this was a really complicated fix. I don't expect this to be something that maybe even makes sense right off the bat. It might take a few views to kind of figure it out. It's really just the point of this video is to show you that if things are not perfectly in line with one another and lines start getting deleted or faces are askew, it's impossible to connect the geometry. And as we get into more advanced things later on, as you work through SketchUp, you'll run into that if you're making more complicated things like furniture or organic shapes. All right, thanks guys.